Good evening, guys. Tonight we're going to talk about the cross-cultural communication conflicts in a business with my group members. So first we get cross-cultural communication. Cross-cultural communication became very important after globalization. What happened is, imagine that in Australia, a lot of people working from different countries. So what happens is when they come and work in Australia, they will have different backgrounds, different beliefs in their country. So, and when they work in the same country, they will have a bit of a language or understanding barriers. So cross-cultural communication is the issue that looks over those problems inside the companies. So it focuses more on understanding different business rules. For example, if a person comes from an India or Japanese background, so they will have a different background in Australia, and the company will have a different background as well, different culture. So what happens is it will be hard for them to blend in the culture of an Australia. So this cross-cultural communication tries to understand the problems and tries to solve the problem between the different cultures and different languages from a different country's people. So aims to build common communication pattern, which means that like each and every company will have a different culture, and within these cultures they will have a communication pattern. Some cultures will have a like orders coming top to bottom, and some cultures will have a different, like bit more flatter structure. So which means that they will have a bit more talking communication between each and every member of the group. So what happens with that is, especially when people coming from different countries, they will have a different communication backgrounds, which for example in Japan it will come from the top to the bottom, but in Australia it's a bit more flatter. So, and that's why managers expect people to talk more to people in the field. So that's why they might have a bit of a problem understanding or getting into the company. So that's with cross-cultural communication issues, we'll just try to understand all these problems and try to solve the problem, try to come up with ideas that can overcome the issues. We're going to talk about language differences, non-verbal misinterpretation, culture shock, and conclusion. So now my friend Navika is going to talk about language differences and how to overcome these problems in a company.
We're going to talk about language barriers. One of the most common barrier in the cross-cultural communications is language barrier. Language is much more about learning the new vocabulary and grammar, but we have so many different languages in all over the world in different countries. Like we have businesses and from one country exporting our business or trading into another country. So we do have language barriers, because if we go from India to Japan, we have a barrier in that. So we need to see if we can talk to them in their own language, maybe English, or in their Japanese language. So it's not only about if we go from one country to another, it's not about the language only, it's about the accent, how they talk. As we go from Australia to Canada, we have different accents. So the tendency, how someone thinks or behaves is one of the language barrier, as well as we do not know how the person of that country is going to behave or act while in a meeting or in time. And the proper use of vocabulary, sometimes people use idioms or what do you say, it's a group of words, we don't understand their dialects, so that could be the barrier as well. We gotta know how we can overcome about those barriers, and we can overcome. My friend's gonna change the slide. Overcoming the language barriers. Like English is regarded as the most important language, and it is used all over the world. So we can have meetings or dealings in English language, as it is easy to understand. Or maybe if we're going from one country to another, we can learn their language before we go into them. And or moreover, we can even use it. We can have an interpreter or a translator along with us. We do not have to hesitate while talking to them. Asking for clarification if we are not able to understand what they're saying, so we do not pause or hesitate to ask them. We can ask for a clarification again and again to understand what they are saying, and so it is easy for us to overcome the barrier. Now, my next friend, Hamilton, is going to talk about next topic, that is the non-verbal communication.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk about the nonverbal communication issues, which is 86% about communication attempts. And it's another way to show your feelings without saying a word. Levine told us that there are 4 different ways to do that: by gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, and use of space. Each culture has their own different ways to talk with nonverbal communication. And if someone from another culture try to understand, it's going to be very difficult. However, it's easy to see when someone is doing a nonverbal communication. And for example, this one is an international communication issue, and everybody knows that I'm tired, which is easy to see and easy to say what it is, and it's very rude if you do it in a meeting, in business, or even in a presentation. And the shaking hands are also improving, since more cultures and more cultures are starting to use. And to avoid these nonverbal issues, we need to pay attention to nonverbal cues, paying attention to cultural difference, and being alert for inconscient messages. And now I'm going to pass for Victor, which is going to talk about culture shock.
Hey guys, tonight we're going to talk about culture shock. First of all, culture shock can be defined as a set of emotional reactions which can hardly be identified for a person. Also supporting this idea, Massionis 2010 argues that can be also defined as an unfamiliar experience which comes from a confront with different habits or different language or different locations. Most of the times it can be considered as a negative impact, but it also has a positive side. The negative ones, we can maybe a person can be irritated because of the culture shock, because they don't know the environment, they don't know the language, so it might be irritating for them, or maybe they can feel like some rejection about this environment, or even impotence feeling. However, the positive sides, a person who deals with it in a good way can understand the other cultures better, and also can improve self-efficacy. Now I'm going to talk a bit about how to overcome the culture shock. First of all, if you're going to somewhere, or if you're in a business context, if you're trying to reach someone from overseas to try to develop their business, or even speak with your boss who is from other place, your colleagues, you first of all try to understand the culture, seek some information about it if you don't know anything. So that's the first point. The second one, be patient, because it takes time. Like it's not easy to get adapted or something that you have no idea what it is or where it's come from. The third one, try to get your mind full of things. Be active, be mentally active, also social active, and use your family, your friends as a support. First of all, finally, embrace it. Embrace the culture shock. Try to give your best to overcome the situation. It's much more personal than every other things. Okay. Thanks so much, guys. My friend Sandy gonna conclude for us.
Hey guys, thanks Peter for your part, and today's part for me is the conclusion part, and like we have gone through the slides of the cross-cultural communication, and what the conclusion states is use language as a converse methodology instead of having stereotype mindsets. So I think that is more precise in what it means. Stereotype is something that you judge a person right before they even talk something, or maybe after they talk something, stating that person is going to be this way and he's not going to be talking to us properly, or just judging a person through their looks and through their nationality. That is something which is wrong, I would say, and instead of that, we should take communication as a mode of conversation, and we should make sure that that person, whatever is the best for the person to converse, we should find the best ideology and the methodology to converse. The next thing which I would say is non-verbal communication does play a vital role in communication. Exactly. Eye gesture, hand gesture, and the facial expression, everything does play a very vital role when you communicate with a person. For example, if a person comes in front of you who doesn't know the language which you speak, so it doesn't mean that you just neglect him and go. You got to talk in a way that you express yourself with the hands or maybe with the face, and make him feel that okay, you're trying to communicate something, and that is when he would try himself to find that okay, he tries understanding what you're trying to say. So that is what I would say for the second one. And after that, it's an avoiding cultural shock. Avoiding cultural shock in work society is something which is very necessary at this point of time, because almost every part of the world has this culture shock which is going, because foreigners, when they go for work or for the study, they face this situation, and it goes for a dilemma whether to work there or not. If that is avoided, I think most of us would feel better in working in places which we have never been. And next thing which I would say is how to avoid it. The best way to avoid such cross-culture shocks is to find the best ideology and methodology in how to present ourselves to the person who is new to us. Presenting in sense, we got to find the easiest way so that we can communicate. Communication doesn't mean that we just speak to one person or maybe talk to that person in the freest manner possible. No, that's not the way. It's like you just tell what you're supposed to tell in form of writing or maybe form of explaining through hands, like I already spoke, and maybe all these effects might help in communicating what you're supposed to say. Then communication is never a barrier. Yeah, communication is never a barrier as long as you know to use it wisely and make the other person feel that you're talking something sensibly, and also wait for the other person to communicate back and state, okay, I've understood, what's the next. So once the other person understands, which means you have got the bond and the frequency with the other person. So the last thing which I would say is, if language is a barrier, then there is every other way to make the other person or the group understand what the person is trying to converse. Yes, if language was a barrier, and I think no one would have communicated in this world, and there's nothing called talking to each other would have ever happened. So, as I've been concluding for today's slides, I would say that communication is never a barrier unless and until we find the right choice of people and right choice of communication steps and the methods to follow so that we communicate whatever is supposed to be communicated. So yeah, so after this conclusion part, I have a small video to present how people face the communication barriers in the field of HDFC, which is a worldwide branch. Here the other video goes.
In some Asian cities, it's considered acceptable for a commuter to fall asleep on the shoulder of a stranger. In New York, it's quite a different story. Of course, you can always adapt. We're the global bank that never underestimates the importance of local knowledge. HSBC, the world's local bank.
So yeah, a small bit of video tells you what exactly did the video communicate. So what did it communicate? It states that there are three cultures of people. One is the Asian, another one is a American, another one is maybe again a Russian. So what it states is they haven't communicated, but they felt that they have told something to the other person through the body gestures. So that is what I'm saying for today. So communication doesn't mean that we need to communicate through words. There are loads of ways to communicate. Unless and until we don't figure it out, we can't communicate something what we are supposed to tell for another person. And these are the references which we have used. We have used almost like 18 references in our slideshow. And this is our teammates, starting with myself, Sudarshan, followed by Vita, Navika, and then Hamilton, and finally Iran, who has started with her introduction. Thanks a lot.